Lots to get to tonight. Welcome into the Man Cave, including, well, the trailer is here to the most progressive movie ever. We will show you what we can, because there's even rules about what you can and can't show on telly, which is why this thing is going to be an amazing movie out Australia Day next year. Now, we're going to have a tough conversation about something that I know Liberal leaders Jess Wilson and Susan Lee are very passionate about trying to fix. But do normal people care? We'll get to this in a moment or two's time. And the great Nigel Farage, he joins us live from the United Kingdom. Remember, according to the polls, the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He appears regularly one place in Australia, that is here. And we're very thankful always to have him on Paul Murray Live. Well, second day in a row, and if you believe the 6 p.m. news, there's only one story in town.
One Nation leader Pauline Hanson has been censured by the Senate.
The One Nation leader refused to apologise.
Controversial characters with Pauline Hanson expelled over her burqa stunt.
Ooh. And, well, the media turned up, and they turned up in quite the droves today. The pictures that I saw at the press conference would suggest that there was some major resignation or appointment that was taking place. I haven't seen this many people gathering in the gardens of Parliament House since Liberal Party change of leader and Prime Minister. And weren't they so interested in hearing what Pauline had to say about why she did what she did?
Senator, why now? Senator, why now? You've done this 7 years ago. Why are you doing it now?
But no, the biggest story in Canberra today was not what was taking place in the Senate, but what the government is planning to do to make things even harder for you and I to know about what is happening behind closed doors. Now, I've told you for how long now about this is the type of transparency that the oh-so-transparent Prime Minister and his government, whenever you ask them a question or ask them to reveal something. This, by the way, is not the secret location of Harold Holt. This was about the effects on power prices of the government's current energy policy. Hardly national secret stuff. Well, this government wants to make it even harder for you to see even as little as what you can just see there. You see, those documents only available after the Senate demanded it, and the Freedom of Information laws. Now, the Prime Minister and his Attorney General want to make it even harder for us to be able to know what is going on behind the scenes. Now, this may well be great for political advantage, but if we do not see what happens behind the scenes, then we are frankly not voters, we are mushrooms. We are kept in the dark and fed an unpleasant diet. Well, while trying to justify the changes to this legislation, where, put simply, if a piece of paper goes anywhere near the cabinet table, well, then no one will see it, no one will see it for 30 years, as if every single thing is a national secret. No, they just don't want you to know the ingredients into the stews that they are cooking up. They are trying to somehow say that Donald Trump and the 2020 election has some sort of a connection as to why we need to change freedom of information legislation in Australia. What? What garbage. As you saw, freedom of information changes necessary because of AI-powered applications during the 2020 election loss. The Albanese government has used the unusual reference to Donald Trump's 2020 election loss to justify its major crackdown in freedom of information laws, failing to point to any domestic examples of artificial intelligence driving vexatious claims for government documents. This is one of their worries, one of their concerns, one of the reasons why the threshold must be lifted, that you must have this much money or this much access to be able to find out, even ask a question that, of course, they respond with the black line through everything. They're trying to pretend there's a whole bunch of bots that are just creating thousands and thousands and thousands of applications for information, and all of it is just in the too hard basket. Well, again, is there an example of this in Australia? Apparently not. We continue. In the latest blow for the changes, Labor has been unable to produce one domestic example of AI being used to generate vexatious FOI applications. Now, this is a key justification, but there is no evidence for it. Now, if something goes wrong and, yes, AI starts overrunning the system, OK, maybe there's some conversation to be had. But they're telling us it has to happen now with no examples of it actually happening at all. The Attorney-General's Department did point to an unsubstantiated international example. Quote, there are clear examples in international jurisdictions where AI tools have been used to generate thousands of freedom of information requests, including election workers being inundated with freedom of information requests in the 2020 presidential election. What? What? Again, not a single example that they can show of how the freedom of information system is being abused by people using artificial intelligence. Instead, a way back when, conversation back in 2020, when firstly AI was in its infancy, popularity of things like Grok or ChatGPT or Gemini or Meta's version of it, all the different AIs that exist. But still, this is being served up as the reason why you should not be able to know what the government is doing. Now, I think this is the biggest story in Canberra because this government promised to be better, but I am not naive. I know that as soon as they get their hand on power, they shut the gate. This government is so addicted to the sunlight of truth that when they put legislation together, if you are in the room trying to give them any sort of advice on the behalf of an industry group or a charity, they make you sign a non-disclosure agreement that you will definitely not tell anyone what are the options being discussed on the table. This is about making sure no one leaks, no one rocks the boat. Everyone agrees at the end before the decision is made. This is, frankly, Labor Party caucus rules, where once a decision is made, everyone says yay, not the way a democracy works. Well, thankfully, the Senate can push back. And David Pocock is a man who, on most things, we will disagree. But on this, I am all in on him and anyone else with power to be able to point out the lie at the heart of this government about telling the truth. We had him on the show last night. It's worth going and having a look at. Go and find it on our YouTube page or obviously skynews.com.au. The cost of living, still the major issue for many people around the country, and inflation looks like we are on our way back up. In fact, the Prime Minister, the Treasurer and their little dog too told us that we had turned the corner, nothing to see here, everything's okay. They, of course, fiddled and buggerised around with the numbers when it came to the energy rebates, which pushed down the inflation number. It got them the February rate cut, which, of course, helped lead to the 90-something seats they ended up winning in the Parliament. Yeah, I'll keep talking about it because that's how they won. Well, as you know, inflation has been ticking up. Just a couple of months ago, we had already hit the highest number that we had been in the past 12 months. Just 1 month ago, we were going up by a full percentage and a bit point, where the magical 2 was becoming the troublesome 3. Well, today, we are being softened up for what might be more of the same. Now, you already know it because prices have never gone down. This was all just myths and magical thinking from governments. But Jim Chalmers in the Parliament today, and well done to those who noticed it, is starting to hint that by this time tomorrow, when the official numbers come out, inflation will be going up again.
Now, economists expect that the unwinding of some state energy rebates will push the headline number up a bit tomorrow, and that's why they have encouraged us to focus largely on the underlying number.
Oh, now the underlying number matters. Remember a couple of years ago when the number was really high and the underlying number was still pretty high? Oh, the underlying number doesn't matter. Now, again, there is such a gulf between the numbers that are produced at every 30 days by the number in Canberra. Your life, you know it, from any and everything that you've bought or any and everything you've had a look at on the internet, well, those prices, they keep staying high. Why? A whole collection of different reasons. But the Australia's turned the corner and everything's okay. How easy is Christmas going to be for you? How easy is it going to be for you to pay for the grandkids, to pay for the family, to pay for the kids, to pay for the missus, to pay for the bloke? The reality is this Christmas will be tougher than last Christmas, which was tougher than the Christmas before, which was tougher than the Christmas before that. Nothing to see here, of course, in the political class because they have all received 4 pay rises since Albo became our elected king in 2022. The opposition doing their best to draw attention back to cost of living. I think this should have been each and every question in question time today, but here's part of their push.
Households and businesses are struggling in the lead up to a hot summer and all the expenses they face at the kitchen table, with Christmas, with summer, with back to school.
And on the matter to do with power prices, well, what a confrontation, what a conversation, what a great bit of television it was to see our political editor, Andrew Clennell, on Politics Now, talking to former Liberal, now lapdog of the Labor Party, Matt Keane. Pretty simple question. You say it's time to change the system because it's the cheapest form of energy. So, OK, now that there's more of what you want in the system, when do the bills start coming down? Answer, humana, 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 humana.
Could they go up for 10 years? Because that's what this power company CEO said. Could prices continue to increase for 10 years before that transition is completed?
Well, that's not what the Australian Energy Market Commission says. They say get on with the job of rolling out renewables, and quite frankly, we should be listening to the independent experts.
All right, well, so when do they stop going up, Matt Keane?
Andrew?
When do they stop going up,
when we get on
prices?
with the job. When we get on with the job of rolling out renewables at scale. We know it's the cheapest form of electricity, and the problem
How many years does that take?
In the grid, it's not enough, Andrew.
How many years does that take?
The job, Andrew. Well, it will take the coordinated rollout.
Now, there are ways to answer the question. If they want to say sooner rather than later because we're going as hard as possible, we'll give me an exact date, I can't. But the idea that they can't say, I can't, because then they will have to admit what they have looked the other way and lied to people about for years and years. But isn't the government confident that despite the fact that it failed to deliver on the $275 power bill lie, yet they got re-elected and got a bigger margin, that Australians aren't that fired up about power prices? Now, you and I know that it's deeply frustrating if you're running a small business. Those changes are in the thousands of dollars. It's in the hundreds of dollars in the households, and everyone's knowledge of working families, the working poor, the middle class, is that every bill matters. And if those bills keep going up in part because of government policies, then at some point they turn around and blame the government. But instead, they're just going to spin their wheels and pretend that the three-wheel car is somehow going to set a new lap record at Bathurst. And anyone who points out that there is an emperor with no clothes on, well, of course, you're part of the problem. Now, you know that I rely very heavily upon the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I love the amount of data that they have out there. I love the information, and we're talking about everything from economy numbers to the way our societies work. And the single biggest way that they put all of that information together is by getting us all to fill out a form on one night. Next year is when there is going to be the next census. It is compulsory to fill out the census, not compulsory to answer each and every question, to my knowledge, but there will be some new questions or some new wording, which I'm sure some people will get very fired up about. I'm not, because if it gives us a realistic picture of what's going on, well, great, we know more information. Questions in and around sexuality and gender are going to become more complicated. But let's be honest, every time you fill out most forms, some version of this question now exists. So, surprise, surprise, the progressive government just has now moved it to a nationwide survey. For the first time, Australians aged 16 will be asked in the 2026 census to identify their sexual orientation and sex recorded at birth. Note, 16 and over, okay? So if you've got kids, grandkids, it's not going to be a question for those littlies, but 16 and above. Participants can choose, by the way, up to 4 cultural ancestries and say whether they ride a bike or an e-bike to work, according to the updated questions which have been announced today by the Bureau of Statistics. This is what the question is going to look like when it comes to gender. Now, again, a few people may get a little outraged here, but for me, it'll just be person 1, and you mark the box bloke, or if you want to go woman, or you want to go non-binary, or you want to put in pansexual or whatever else you want to put in there, good luck to you, okay? Prefer not to answer is also an option. But we'll actually get to see a number, and I think we will all be surprised by the number that will come out and how much we talk about these issues. But I don't have a problem with it because it gives us the real-life data. If there are hundreds of thousands of people who cannot answer to man, woman, non-binary or whatever you want to make up, well, okay, we'll all learn about it together. But I think we all will know the number will not be quite as big as the amount of time people talk about the number. The One that I do think is interesting and worth talking about here is other changes. The 2026 census will mean Australians can report as I mentioned before, 4 cultural ancestries describing the ethnic makeup of their household. So, okay, how do you get to 4? Well, there's your mum, there's your dad, so that's potentially 2. And then how do you choose between grandma and grandpa on mum's side or grandma and grandpa on another side? Anyway, up to 4. The change to the question relating to the country of birth of your parents will also include this could be a parent of any gender, just in case somehow that was offended to be asked about whether you're mother or father. Oh, goodness me. But still, I don't care that we get more info. That always helps because we actually know what things really are as opposed to what, we might be feeling in our waters as opposed to just going off and actually doing the survey compulsory next year. What about on other people's money tonight? Lots to get to, and 2 of my favourite topics, other people's money, how they waste it, and the triangle of dependence. The way left-wing governments get themselves into power and stay there is to have more people on welfare, more people working for the government, or more private businesses where the government is your client. Jacinta Allen, perfect example about the employment number. Victorian taxpayers are slugged more than $1 million per week for the people who work for Premier Jacinta Allen. We're not talking about all of the government. We're not talking about all of the cabinet. We're talking about the 309 ministerial staffers connected to the Premier. Victorian taxpayers have been slugged with a huge weekly bill of $1.1 million for the Premier Jacinta Allen's 309-strong department, including an amount of money that they spent, obviously, to pump themselves up on Facebook and Instagram of $220,000. Now, personally, I don't think Australian taxpayers' money in any way, shape or form should be allowable to be spent to boost their social media profile. Do it yourself or get the party to pay for it. On Tuesday, the Public Accounts and Estimates Committee heard that the Department of Premier and Cabinet costs $61.3 million to run the whole thing last year alone. This figure is up by 19% compared to the former Premier, Daniel Andrews, my words, not the article, who was running the joint on the credit card at $51 million a year, from 51 now to 61. The Herald Sun did the hard work here, and according to them, the DPC, the Department of Premier and Cabinet Secretary, said that running the Premier's private office, by the way, is now $18 million, 83 staff working specifically for the Premier, not the wider Premier and Cabinet Office. Now, part of how they spend this money, including $220,000 that they pay to social media companies to pump up their social media profile, to boost a post, again, should be paid for by the party, should be paid for by the individual, but no, it's paid for by you, the taxpayer. And there's also the staffers whose entire job is to make crap like this on social media.
That's a slam dunk. Did I get it? Did it? Well, then that's the tape. Here at Pop Mart in Shanghai, checking out the enormous Labubu range. Now, Brendan, mean set of fluffy guys here.
More of where they came from in a moment or two's time when we get to while you were working. By the way, to give you an idea, Premier's office alone, 83 people. Premier's department, about 300 people. You want to know the great slant between being the government and not the government? The opposition leader has got just 17 people. 17 people. Now, they've got to come up with all the policies, all the alternatives. Now, that 17, by the way, doesn't all end up just working for the opposition leader. That also can get spread out across, say, the Shadow Treasurer, a whole bunch of other people's offices. It has never been easier to have it your way when you are the government. But watch this and see how we go. Crazy stuff. Now, I want to talk about Brisbane and buses in particular. My dad drove a bus for a long time. School runs, snow runs, up and down the coast. God love you, Kenny dog. Hope you're watching tonight. If not, word, get back to him. Give him a cuddle for me if you see him tomorrow. Well, today, the bus drivers of Brisbane decided to have a protest, and why shouldn't they? Good on them for doing so. I fully support the drivers and the union for doing it. Why? Because bus drivers are being treated like punching bags. 2 Brisbane bus drivers a day are being beaten up or spat on. A record 208 assaults in September. Not a whole year, September, according to the union. In the worst of the attacks on November the 7th, on the 340 route, a veteran driver was left with a fractured jaw, fractured neck vertebrae and a broken nose and several missing teeth. The union wants more plastic shields around the driver. I fully support this. The idea that the bus driver becomes the punching bag because the person who's on the bus, paying the fare or not paying the fare, wants to go for a swing, will bugger them. There are only 300 buses out of 1,300 with the full screens, and we'll only get up to 400 by mid-next year. Now, again, it's a union. They're railing against a Liberal Party local council and the Liberal Party state government, but how can you disagree? When you've got a full screen, you cannot be punched, you cannot be spat on, you can't have objects thrown at you. You are completely safe. Premier, Lord Mayor, if you can, fix it now. Now, you know we all love an opinion poll. Well, let's check on the ones when it comes to Donald Trump right now. Now, as you know, I'm all in on the great man. I'm very glad that he is there, not Kamala Harris. And I'm very glad that the hard work that was done while he was out for 4 years meant that the first few months of his presidency was pretty damn strong. The to-do list had been worked through. But as you know, executive orders are one thing, but we're not even a full year into the presidency. So yes, the hard work's being done now. Theoretically, things start to flow through and they get better. But in America, remember, there's an election every 2 years, meaning that you only get to govern for 1 year and then everyone has the election campaign the other year, and then you govern for a year and then you have another one. In terms of Donald Trump, the midterm would, of course, mean 2 years to go. And the latest opinion polls are not good. And isn't CNN very excited to report it to you?
I would say this is probably the worst 10-day period for the president in the polls his entire second term. The numbers are just atrocious. What are we talking about here in terms of net approval rating? Well, take a look. These are all November polls. The best one of the group puts him at 14 points underwater. That's the Marquette University Law School poll, tied for the worst he's ever had in that poll. Fox, 17 points underwater. Marist, 17 points underwater. The Reuters Ipsos poll, 22 points underwater. And then taking the cake, the AP North poll, 26 points underwater.
Now, we do our best to avoid this here, but don't you love that in half a second you were able to read all of those numbers? You saw they were all red and you saw they were all pretty big, but let me point this one out and point that one out and point this one out and point that one out. The bigger concern politically for Donald Trump is that one of the ways that he was able to win was obviously he got people to vote who were traditional Republicans. He got people to join the Republican Party. Democrats were not interested in some places, turning around and having to back in Harris after the lies in and around Biden. But the one group that actually swings elections, and remember, in the swing states, it's 100,000 here, 100,000 there, 100,000 here, 100,000 there, are people who declare themselves to be independents. How's Trump doing with them?
What is driving these horrific numbers for Donald Trump? Well, why don't we take a look at independents, Trump's net approval rating with independents. Back in January, he was close to even. He was at -4 points. Not great, but not terrible. Look at this number, 43 points underwater with independents in the most recent average of these polls.
A little bit excited? I used to listen to Harry Enton when he was part of the 538 podcast. I don't know where any of this came from, but he loves it. Woo-hoo-hoo. Numbers! Really easy to read numbers that I will circle just in case you haven't seen them. Now, of course, what happens when independents maybe don't want to back in Donald Trump and have an opportunity to either not turn out or vote for the people who want to, pull a giant handbrake on Donald Trump? This all matters because they have a one-seat majority. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she steps down in January, meaning there'll be a 0. Every single MP, every single time, and remember, every vote is a conscience vote. What does it mean if independents stay where they are right now? Well, the obvious.
When you have 43 points underwater with independents, you know you're doing terribly. You can't win with this. If this holds for next year's midterm election, wave adios, amigos, goodbye. See you later to that House Republican majority and that Senate Republican majority very much in danger as well.
I think he's having a good time.